Over 600 B-17 bombers were lost in WWII, and one crew's story nearly became another statistic. The B-17 flying fortress was built to survive. 4 massive engines, a pressurized cabin, and enough firepower to make enemy fighters think twice. It was the most advanced bomber of its era. But advanced didn't mean safe. Between 1942 and 1945, the 8th Air Force flew daylight bombing raids deep into Nazi-controlled Europe, and the B-17 bore the brunt of that campaign. Anti-aircraft fire, enemy fighters, mechanical failure, and the brutal cold at 25,000 feet claimed thousands of crews. Your grandfather and his 9 crewmates climbed aboard their flying fortress knowing the odds. Nearly half of all B-17s sent over Europe never came home. They were about to fly one of the missions that proved why. A B-17 flying fortress wasn't flown by one man, it took 10. Your grandfather was one of them, and every single person on that crew had a job that meant the difference between coming home and not. The pilot controlled the aircraft, but the bombardier aimed the payload. The navigator charted the course through enemy territory. The radio operator sent distress signals. The waist gunners, the tail gunner, the top turret gunner, they were the fortress's teeth, defending against German fighters that could come from any angle. The engineer monitored engines, fuel, hydraulics. The ball turret gunner sat in a bubble underneath the fuselage, exposed and vulnerable, scanning for threats below. One mission in particular tested every single one of them. On a daylight raid deep into Germany, their B-17 took flak damage to the No. 3 engine, caught fire. As the pilot fought to keep the crippled bomber level, the engineer had to make a split-second decision about fuel distribution to keep them airborne long enough to reach friendly territory. The gunners kept scanning, knowing German fighters would be drawn to a smoking bomber like sharks to blood. The navigator recalculated their route on the fly. Each man depended absolutely on the others. That interdependence wasn't just protocol, it was survival. When you hold your grandfather's bomber jacket in your hands, you're not just touching fabric and leather, you're holding the physical record of survival. That worn flight jacket carries patches from every base he flew out of, each one representing dozens of bombing runs over hostile territory. The leather is creased and darkened from decades, but if you look closely, you can still make out the faint outlines where his crew's insignia was sewn. That patch matters because it identifies him not as an individual, but as part of a brotherhood bound by shared terror and trust. The medals pinned to his uniform tell a more official story. The Air Medal for completing 5 combat missions, the Distinguished Flying Cross for extraordinary achievement under fire. But the real artifact is the jacket itself. It was worn during the mission that nearly ended everything, the one where flak tore through the fuselage, where 2 engines caught fire, where the pilot nursed that crippled B-17 back across the English Channel on fumes and prayer. Your grandfather wore this jacket through 35 missions. 35 times he climbed into the belly of a bomber knowing the odds. The patches and medals document his service, but the jacket documents his survival. It's the difference between a name on a memorial and a voice that lived to tell the story. That's why it matters. Your grandfather's B-17 crew flew with the 8th Air Force during its most brutal period, the strategic bombing campaign over Germany that claimed more American lives than any other air operation in history. Between 1943 and 1945, the 8th lost over 26,000 personnel, many of them bomber crews who never made it back across the Channel. That's not just a historical footnote. That's nearly an entire generation of young men, most barely out of their teens, who faced odds so terrible that survival felt like a miracle. What makes your family's story different is that it humanizes those statistics. When you look at that bomber jacket, the leather worn thin from countless flights, the patches marking each completed mission, you're not seeing abstract history. You're seeing the tangible proof that your grandfather was one of the few who beat impossible odds. The 8th Air Force's campaign was strategically vital, but it came at a cost that America struggled to comprehend then and struggles to remember now. Your grandfather's crew, and thousands like them, deserve to be more than numbers in a casualty report. They deserve their names, their stories, and their sacrifices remembered as the foundation of American victory. Your grandfather's bomber jacket and medals aren't just relics, they're a bridge to understanding what those 10 men endured. When we preserve these stories through family artifacts and oral history, we honor not just the survivors, but the thousands who didn't come home. Every patch represents a mission, every ribbon a choice between duty and fear. That's why sharing these personal accounts matters. They transform statistics into human beings, ensuring the real cost of air warfare is never forgotten by the generations ahead.